not reading from the Bible. So, as we always like to start on the stream here, guys, I'm going to read from Robert Greene, his new book, The Daily Laws. I highly recommend you pick up this book. The way that it's laid out makes it super easy to take a lot of Robert's lessons from his other books and apply them into our everyday life, or for us specifically, into our trading. So I'd like to read actually from a few days ahead of today. Today is the 23rd. I'd like to read from the 26th. Since we won't be streaming on the 26th, I think that this is something that we definitely don't want to miss. We don't want to overlook this. Now, this is called the confirmation bias. It starts with a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald. It says, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. So it's to be able to hold two opposing beliefs at the same time and still move forward and still function, which is I think it's a crucial characteristic that traders should work to master, is to balance that confirmation bias by holding opposing beliefs at all times. But let's go into this here. So Robert says, to hold an idea and convince ourselves we've arrived at it rationally, we go in search of evidence to support our view. What could be more objective or more scientific? But because of the pleasure principle and its unconscious influence, we manage to find the evidence that confirms what we want to believe. This is known as the confirmation bias. When investigating confirmation bias in the world, take a look at theories that seem a little too good to be true. Statistics and studies are trotted out to prove them. These are not very difficult to find once you're convinced of the rightness of your argument. On the internet, it is easy to find studies that support both sides of an argument. It's also easy to find a lot of BS information that clogs that up. In general, you should never accept the validity of people's ideas because they have supplied, quote, evidence. Instead, examine the evidence yourself in the cold light of day with as much skepticism as you can muster. Remember, I've said before, it's not good as traders to be cynical, but skeptical is perfectly acceptable. Now here, the Daily Law says your first impulse should always be to find the evidence that disconfirms your most cherished beliefs and those of others. This is true science. And this comes from the laws of human nature. Number 1, master your emotional self, the law of irrationality. So I think for us as traders to apply that idea of avoiding confirmation bias, it's really important to, I'll give you a tactic here, use if-then statements. If this happens, then I will react this way. If that happens, I will react this way. Almost back yourself into a corner where you only have two if-then scenarios in front of you, and that way there is no room for confirmation bias because you're going to react. If this happens, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, or if this happens, you're going to do A, B, and C. So for example, if you look at like today's trade, when I was looking to short GBP USD, I knew that if it held the 8 EMA, I could get good risk reward to the 200 EMA. So that would mean I'd want to be short, to this divergence line, not the 200 EMA. I also knew if this decided to reverse and come up through the 8 EMA and through the 21 EMA, the yellow and red lines, then I would not want to be in the trade anymore. There is no confirmation bias now because I know if it breaks the EMAs, I have a stop loss in, but I would want to get out of that trade. And I know that it could come lower and give me good risk reward, and that's why I decided to take the trade. So there's no room for confirmation bias if you're using precise rules to take your entry, and specifically if you're using if-then statements to back yourself into every trade that you take. If you're just throwing trades around, you're not even really trading, you're just gambling, and confirmation bias will be even worse for you. You're only going to see the things that you think feed your idea, feed your direction, feed your trade idea, but that's not proper trading because, one more comment here, that focuses more on the outcome of the trades, which is completely out of our control, versus the process of the trades, which is in our control. So back to what I said about the if-then statements, that's being process-focused versus being outcome-focused. The confirmation bias and the outcome-focused person are very similar. So when we're aware of both of those, we can choose to act differently. Does that make sense? I hope that gives you a little bit of a little nugget to apply into your trading the rest of this week.